the company, which led to her husband's trust receiving around £60 million of taxpayers' money. But she insisted that lying to the media wasn't a crime. International news, and there's been growing pressure on Israel, with David Cameron joining Germany's Foreign Affairs Minister in calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. In a joint article for the Sunday Times newspaper today, the new Foreign Secretary warned that too many civilians have been killed, and he said it was time for a sustainable ceasefire. The intervention is a significant shift in the government's tone on Israel's war against Hamas terrorists. A senior Network Rail manager has had to resign after hundreds of passengers were left stranded for more than 3 hours on a stationary train outside London. Michelle Handforth had been the managing director for the Wales and Western region since 2021. Her departure comes after hundreds of passengers were stuck in darkened carriages after a fault with an overhead cable meant all trains were held without power or explanation outside Paddington in West London early this month. Passengers complained they were given no information and, more critically, no access to toilet facilities. Footballer Tom Lockyer remains in hospital today after suffering a cardiac arrest during a football game yesterday. The Luton Town FC captain is in stable condition. He's undergoing tests and scans. The second half of yesterday's Premier League match in Bournemouth was abandoned after he collapsed on the field. The 29-year-old was unresponsive before being taken to hospital. And lastly, the northernmost point of the Shetland Islands has become home to the UK's first licensed spaceport, ready for vertical rocket launches. The first takeoffs from Saxavord are due next year. That's after the Civil Aviation Authority gave the go-ahead. The privately owned site will host up to 30 launches every year for companies looking to send satellites into space. The Transport Secretary says it'll help put the UK at the forefront of space innovation. That's the news on GB News, across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
British Airways removes a Jewish sitcom from its in-flight entertainment. Activists pledge to ignore new government guidelines on kids who claim to be trans. And the mayor of Boston holds a racially segregated Christmas party. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This is a show where we take a look at culture, current affairs and politics, and of course we'll have the latest from those lovable culture warriors. Only a week left now for them to get Christmas cancelled. Let's see how they do. Coming up on the show tonight, vegan educator Ed Winters will be here. He's going to tell us about his new book, How to Argue with a Meat Eater and Win Every Time. Lewis Schaefer cannot wait for that one. And as we... Lewis, I'm doing the introduction to the show. Don't interrupt. As we reach the end of 2023, Fraser Myers from Spiked will be here to discuss this year's biggest stories regarding free speech and what we can expect for 2024. And we end the year with a victory for free speech. We're going to be hearing about a teacher in America who won a landmark legal victory after being fired for avoiding the use of personal pronouns when speaking to a student. And of course, myself and my fantastic panel will be answering lots of questions from our studio audience. And my comedian panellists tonight are Jonathan Cogan and Lewis Schaefer. Welcome.
Thank you.
Lewis, I'm disturbed that you're wearing striped socks, because I think it's a bad look for you.
Oh, well, let the audience decide. You're wrong about many things.
I am wrong about many things.
I mean, that's only in this country is the only country in the world where gay men have horrible fashion sense.
And that's me, is it?
That's you, yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
A friend of mine described you as Ursine the other day. I think that's a good description, like bear-like, like a shaved bear.
You didn't need to define that word for me.
Oh no, you know what it meant. Absolutely.
No, I didn't know what it meant.
Well, now you do. This is like an education. How are you, Jonathan?
Like pretty good.
Have you had a good week?
Good week. I was at the GB party last night.
You were at the GB News Christmas party?
Yeah.
Was that very raucous?
Yeah, it was good fun. If you think the one in Boston was segregated, you should have seen it. No, it was good fun. A lot more latex than I thought. Liz Truss was there.
Yeah.
Those two things aren't connected, no?
If the rumours are allegedly.
OK,
Lewis?
let's move on very quickly to some questions from the audience. So we've got a question from Mary. Hi, Mary.
Hello. Should white people be banned from Christmas parties?
Yeah, Mary's on it straight away. This is what Jonathan was alluding to. Of course, this is the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, and she, well, apparently Boston has been holding these non-white parties every year for a few years now. And but the mistake that the current mayor made was that she sent out invitations to the white guys as well in the council, right? And they're only meant to invite the non-white guys.
They didn't invite the white women? Because that sounds like an all right party, I'm just saying.
No, look, I was saying guys in a sort of gender-neutral sense.
OK, fair enough.
What do you make of this, Jonathan? I mean, racial segregation is bad, isn't it? I thought we decided that a few decades ago.
Yeah, I think there was a word for racial segregation. I couldn't quite remember what it was.
Can't put my finger on that one.
No, I mean, what do I think? It's obviously very divisive. From a libertarian perspective, they should be able to invite who they want to a party, but at the same time, this is a government official.
Yeah, the mayor.
Yeah, it's not really on.
I mean, that's not good, is it? We've actually got some footage of her apology. Let's have a look at this.
I think we've had individual conversations with everyone so people understand that it was truly just an honest mistake that went out in typing the email field, and I look forward to celebrating with everyone at the holiday parties that we will have besides this one as well. So it is my intention that we can again be a city that lives our values and create space for all kinds of communities to come together.
You know, I really don't care. I mean, if people want to host a non-white party or, a Jewish-only party or a gay-only party, I don't care. But the point is that that's the mayor, and that is very bad to racially segregate as a mayor. It's not like in her own time. This is an official council party, right?
Well, if the government, the state, the government, the authority is paying for it, it's really bad.
It's terrible.
I think it's bad. But the irony of it is she's
hot,
a white woman, and you laugh, but in America, people of Chinese, East Asian people are in the white category.
They're considered white. No, that's right. No, a lot of critical race theorists have sort of said that Asian Pacific people are white adjacent because they succeed. Because they do very well, and they in fact, it's harder for people from that origin to get into Ivy League universities because they set the rate so much. And that is institutionalised racism, surely.
Are Jews white? Because I get a lot of tweets on Twitter telling me that I'm not, so it'd be nice to know.
Well, I think that's very much up to you.
OK.
As a Jew.
All right, I'm off-white.
OK, there we go. You've made your decision there. OK, I do think generally, I think it's bad. Racial segregation is bad. That's the moral of tonight's story.
You saved Christmas.
Yeah, there we go. Let's get a question now from Nicholas. Hi, Nicholas.
Hiya. Could airlines showing the Jewish sitcoms escalate the Middle East conflict?
Well, yeah, maybe. Now, this is an odd story because this hasn't had anywhere near as much traction as one would suspect. British Airways, they have their in-flight entertainment programmes. They've decided to take a sitcom. It's called Hapless. It's a sitcom about Jewish people. It's a British sitcom. Our friend Josh Howie is apparently in it. I haven't seen the show, but apparently he's in that show. And they've said this because they don't want to appear to be taking sides in the war between Israel and Hamas. Now, Lewis, this sitcom has got absolutely nothing to do with the war in Israel. It's just about Jewish people.
Yeah, no, that's not true.
What do you mean?
Because the war is all about Jewish people. It's all about...
OK.
It's all...
But do you think the British Airways should be taking this show off?
Do you think anybody in this country would care about the war in Israel if it wasn't Jews? There were millions, there were hundreds of thousands of people killed in Syria right next door. Lebanon has had incredible wars. There's been wars what's going on in Yemen right now.
Yeah.
OK? Nobody cares about it. They only care about it because it's about Jews. So it is...
The only thing about that, Lewis, is I read an awful lot about the Syrian conflict. It seemed to be in the papers every day.
Yeah,
so I'm not so sure...
Nerd. These people...
The hoi polloi.
The hoi polloi, the uneducated, unwashed masses.
The pro.
Okay.
Watch GBNews.
I'm already regretting inviting you tonight. Jonathan, what do you make of this? I mean, so Josh is in the show, right? Josh Howie is in the show.
We've actually got him down the line now.
No, we haven't. Don't try and take over the show, Jonathan.
Oh, sorry. Okay,
no.
I thought he was... OK. Well, I can do a Josh impression.
No, please. Okay. Please don't
What
do
I
that.
think? Yeah, no, it's obviously... They're saying we're not taking a side. They're very clearly taking a side.
Well, no, now they are, by taking...
taking it down, that's what I mean,
that's the irony, isn't it? They said that they wanted to take it off to avoid the perception of taking a side, but by removing it, they clearly are.
And that is a clear, conflation between you know, Jews and Zionists. It's like anything Jewish is like Zionist, and Zionist is just, we all know, it's like a dog whistle for saying we don't like Jews. Zionists.
I mean, it does feel a bit anti-Semitic.
It does,
anti-Semitic, doesn't it? Anyway, so that's British Airways for you. Let's move on to a question from Alan. Where's Alan? Hi, Alan.
Hi there, guys. Well, considering gender ideology raised its ugly head under the tenure of the Tory party, should they now ban children from changing gender?
So well, they're going to publish the guidance. I think it's going to be published tomorrow, but they've been dragging their heels on this, haven't they? Alan, what's your view about this? Do you think that they should just say no to social transitioning in schools?
Any government-funded body, anything which comes from the public purse, should not have any gender ideology there at all, full stop. It's very clear-cut for me.
And is that because you take the view that it's a kind of faith-based system? It's undermining secularism?
It's more that the way it's been done with the Tavistock and recently, it's actually promoted and pushed upon people.
Yes.
And, you know, some people do have issues here and they should be looked after, but not the other way around. It's not, let's force these issues onto people.
Yeah.
It's completely inverse to the way it should be.
It's very difficult for teachers as well. I mean, I've got a teacher friend who contacted me to say that he was informed there was a child in his class who wanted to be known by a name of the opposite sex, and he was told to refer to her by the chosen name, but when writing to the parents or filling out reports, to use the old name. In other words, to lie to the parents. So you know, guidance is well overdue, because a lot of schools just don't know what they're doing in this situation. I should say as well that the Cass Review did say that the social transitioning, which is when you treat someone as the opposite sex and use the names and pronouns that they desire, the Cass Review said that that was not a neutral act. There are ramifications to that. It can further ingrain feelings of gender dysphoria, leading to puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, and in some cases, irreversible surgery. So there is a danger to reinforcing a child's perception of themselves. But there's this added problem, which is about alerting the parents. I mean, some activists, Jonathan, are saying that they're going to ignore the government guidelines.
Right.
And that if a child comes to them and says that they want to be trans or want to transition, they're not going to tell the parents. They're not going to tell anyone.
Well, the thing I find alarming there is that school teachers think they know better than the parents what's right for the child.
Right, exactly.
I don't like that. That feels like government overreach, or even if it's not government guidelines, it's institutional overreach, because you have the teachers doing that. Like, I think especially in an important scenario like this, to not alert the parents is to say we're doing something clandestine, I think.
Well, also, and I should emphasise this, because obviously I did teacher training, so I know what I'm talking about here. Don't laugh at me, Lewis.
Was that a joke?
No, it's true. I used to be a teacher. And I know that one of the first things you get taught as a teacher is you can never, ever...
Diddle.
No, Jonathan. You can never, ever say to a child, you can tell me a secret and it's going to be confidential. You can't. That's just absolute no-no. It's deeply unprofessional. It's a safeguarding issue. So that can never happen. These activist teachers are saying that's exactly what they're going to do. So they should clearly be fired.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. If they're going to go behind what's best...
parents' back.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Lewis, say something sensible.
I disagree.
There we go.
I disagree, because every single day, teachers lie to parents. They lie to parents when they say, "Oh, Johnny, he's a genius. He's a very bright child. He's got a bright future."
You know what, Lewis? I never did that at the parents' evening.
But that's very common to do. It's also common to do the other side, where they'll tell the parents, you know what, your student is a poor student.
No, I don't think that's the way to go. I did the reverse, and I think a lot of my teacher, you know, I would say to a parent, "Your child is terrible, and I blame you because it's a genetic issue."
But do you agree with me? Is that there's so much lying going on? I agree with you. The whole trans thing is crazy. I love GBNews because it's all trans all the time. And but it's teachers lie to parents.
Well, they shouldn't, is the point. They shouldn't be lying to parents. They should be communicating with parents, particularly if a child has a medical condition.
My first kiss was with my history teacher when I was in year 8.
Jonathan, is this a serious anecdote you're telling now?
Yeah.
OK, it's got very dark all of a sudden.
Do you know what's amazing? Amazing is that Jonathan actually makes me seem like a serious person.
Look, the pair of you are as bad as each other. I don't know what I was thinking. Let's move on to another question now. This one is from, let's just find the name, John. Where's John? Hi, John. Hi.
Yeah, good evening. My question is, are diversity programmes being phased out?
Yeah, this is really interesting. Now, we saw that crazy footage of Congress where the 3 presidents of Harvard and Penn and MIT were asked, you know, is it against your code of conduct, hateful code of conduct, to call for the genocide of Jews? And they all struggled.
Well, it depends on the context.
Yeah, that's what they kept saying. It depends on the context. It was the most ridiculous thing. But as a result of that, we've had a major backlash against DEI departments in American universities, DEI being diversity, equity and inclusion. And a lot of people are just saying no more to this because it effectively institutionalises racism in the name of phasing out racism. Now, in Oklahoma, Governor Kevin Stitt has this week said he's going to sign an executive order which basically says that DEI departments will not receive any more funding. They'll be phased out of public universities, not just Oklahoma, by the way. So that's Florida, Texas, Iowa. It looks like DEI is dying. Right? And that wasn't a deliberate pun, but it looks like it's going, which I think is great.
Well, I think not only there, I think, and I could be talking out of school here, but I think I've heard that companies like Disney, a lot of them are firing their DEI, the people in charge of that within those companies. So it doesn't seem to be just educational institutions, it also seems to be big businesses as well.
I mean, are people just waking up to this? I mean, we saw the recent South Park episode, which took the mick out of this, where...
people like you are waking people up, so...
Don't patronise me, Jonathan.
No, it's true.
Honestly.
You're fighting the good fight.
If you have to ask for a round of applause, it doesn't count.
One more time, everyone.
No. Absolute silence in the studio. Now I'm become like a school teacher again. This is ridiculous.
I'm not going to kiss you.
Don't come near me. Tell me, Lewis, what you think of this.
Well, what side am I supposed to take?
Lewis, why don't you just tell me your opinion rather than being contrarian?
My opinion is it's a sign that America's the greatest country in the world. Because,
you always say that, but I'm not so sure.
Well, I'm sure because there are 50 separate little nations that have control over their own education, their own stuff.
And that's what's happening here.
Oklahoma is one of them, and there are blue states and red states, and that's what's happening. As you brought up on this program, the silo thing, people.
And of course, what we were describing earlier about, you know, Asian Pacific students finding it harder to get into these universities, that's because of these DEI departments. They're the ones who say, oh, you've got to make it more difficult for Asian kids.
It's not just about that. There's not the departments that are controlling, and that's something that you bring up all the time. You always think there's a small group of people who are controlling everything. It goes very deep.
It clearly goes to the president.
Yeah, exactly. And they're being led by the students. It's not anyone.
I don't think it's being led by the students. I think a lot of it's HR, a lot of it is middle management. You know, we have a lot of this problem. We saw with those presidents talking about the hate speech codes, right? But that's been implemented by various administrators, by various DEI departments. That's where it's come from. They've bought into it.
No, I don't think so. I think you're a university president, and believe it or not, you're afraid of your students.
Well, there's that. No, I actually do take that point. I think that's right. But I think ultimately you can't be calling for the death. And it's really interesting, isn't it, that they claimed that it was context dependent whether calling for the death of Jews should be allowed on campus. But these are the same people that will punish people for microaggressions. They'll say that they'll kick people out inadvertently, or Halloween costumes, exactly. So I don't buy any of it. I think it's utterly ridiculous. These are the most censorious people on the planet, now suddenly claiming to be free speech martyrs. Absolute joke. Anyway, let's move on now to a question from Judy. Where is Judy? Hi, Judy. Hello.
Hello. Should CEOs have to sign off non-diverse hires?
Oh, this was a favourite story this week. We covered this on Headliners. It was the chief executive of Aviva, Amanda Blanc. She says that she's got to say, if any white male gets appointed in a senior position, she said she's got to sign it off.
And her name is Blanc.
And her name is actually Blanc.
Yeah.
Couldn't write it.
No, couldn't write it, absolutely. Now, Lewis, you were quite exercised about this the other night. You were saying that she should be fired. And then the night after, you said she shouldn't be fired. Do you have an opinion on anything?
I do have an opinion. No, I have an opinion on it. Yeah. And I think, you know, first of all, she looks exactly the way I thought she was going to look.
Like Liz Truss.
She's like Liz Truss. She looks exactly with the... Nothing personal, but she looks like one of the.
I think she looks great.
She does.
What's the issue?
She looks. The issue is this: is that private companies should be allowed to decide who they think is best to run their company. I believe that. I'm a total libertarian that way. If they think white men are bad, they should not be forced by any government organization.
Do you not believe that racial discrimination ought to be outlawed?
I don't believe it should be outlawed.
No, that's quite a controversial position to take.
I believe in freedom of action. If you don't want to hire, if you don't want to work with somebody for whatever reason, if you want to fire them immediately and say, you know what, I don't like your glasses, I don't like the jumper you're wearing, whatever it is, you should be able to fire them. But at the same time, we should not be doing business with a company like Aviva. We shouldn't be, because they're not going to hire me or my children or your children.
So wait, let me get this straight. So your view is that anyone, or there shouldn't be any racial discrimination policy. Anyone should be able to hire or fire, even on a whim, even if that means segregating people by race. But you're saying that the response to that is not criminal prosecution, it's for us to boycott those particular companies.
Yeah. You vote with your wallet, essentially.
Yeah.
What do you think of that, Jonathan? It's an interesting idea.
It's an interesting idea. I understand where you're coming from. Yeah, let's say, you know, there were those law cases in America, legal cases in America, where bakers didn't want to make a gay wedding cake, right?
Well, the cake wasn't gay. The cake depicted a gay image.
Yeah, fair enough. It could have been a fruit cake. No, that's not funny.
Wow.
Is that fine? I don't know if that's okay or not.
I think it's okay.
Lewis, yeah.
I'll check with Ofcom afterwards. Go on.
Yeah, they've stopped watching. Yeah, no, so the idea is like, well, yeah, it's your business. You should be able to do whatever you want to do. And if you are racist or homophobic or whatever, I personally wouldn't then frequent them. I wouldn't pay, and I think they should be effectively boycotted and put out of business, but I don't think they should be compelled by law.
But that also happened in Belfast. There was the Ashes Cake Bakery in Belfast, and a gay guy tried to get them to make a cake with... who were the gay puppets from Sesame Street?
Oh, Bert and Ernie.
Bert and Ernie.
Yeah.
And with an image
Big Bird is also a little bit...
Oh, no, bisexual, I think. Yeah. But Bert and Ernie were on the cake, and it was a pro-gay marriage cake, and they said, well, we couldn't make this because it's against our values. And I saw both sides of that, but I kind of thought, just make the cake. It's just a cake. It's not a big deal, is it? This went on for years. It was ridiculous.
Wow.
But then, on the other hand, they weren't refusing him because he was gay. They were refusing him because they disapproved of gay puppets.
Yeah, or even puppets. The idea of somebody sticking their hand up somebody's...
It might be the puppet issue, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we didn't...
I mean, what I'm saying is, right now, Aviva, it used to be Norwich Union. I actually have a policy with them that has about 5 years left to run, a life insurance policy. And I'm thinking... And I'm thinking, you know what, I'm feeling fit, I'm not going to need it, so maybe I should trade it in.
But it is despicable, isn't it, what she... I mean,
what she did... Aviva needs to be punished. They need to lose 10 or 20% of their market value.
But by boycotting rather than by criminal prosecution?
Yeah, by boycotting them. Okay. So when people see the name Aviva, they just get disgusted. If this was happening to a black person, every white person will say, I'm not going to do business with them. They're prejudiced against black people.
Well, then you should start a campaign, Lewis. I look forward to it.
I'm not starting a campaign because I don't care that much.
OK, well, look, that's... You don't care that much. You've just been ranting about it, Lewis. Anyway...
Well, I could change my mind tomorrow.
I know, you probably will.
Let the people...
Lewis, I'm going to have a break now.
Sorry.
Yeah. OK, next on Free Speech Nation, best-selling author and award-winning filmmaker Ed Winters will be here to tell us about his new book, How to Argue with a Meat Eater. I can't wait.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GBNews, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Ed Winters is a strong advocate of veganism who has become a best-selling author, a hugely successful public speaker, and a content creator whose videos have been viewed millions of times. Known as Earthling Ed, he has spoken at a string of top universities around the world, including Cambridge and Harvard, and his short film Milk, about the reality of the dairy industry, won an award this year. And his debut book was a bestseller. His second is How to Argue with a Meat Eater, which will be released later this month. And Ed Winters joins me now. Welcome to the show, Ed. Thank you for having me. So, let's start with Chicken Run 2. Right, so this is a new film that's come out. Now, apparently, it is about chickens being rescued from a, well, I suppose a battery farming situation where they would eventually be turned into nuggets. I think the subtitle of the film is Dawn of the Nuggets.
I think that's right, yes.
Yes. Do you think that that film is going to encourage more children to turn off meat?
I mean, I think there's a good argument for it, but there again, Chicken Run came out 23 years ago or so. And was a similar theme. So I'm not necessarily holding out hope that it'll change lots of minds, but I think it'll influence people into hopefully thinking a little bit more deeply about the origins of their foods.
I mean, is the problem that's just people think the taste is too good?
I think taste is the biggest driver.
Yeah.
Taste, habits, culture, I think all of those things are the biggest driver in why we continue to harm animals unnecessarily.
Yes. Now, in a way, I'm playing devil's advocate here because I am a vegetarian, but the point is, a lot of people will say, well, we have evolved as omnivores. You know, we as a species eat meat and vegetables. Even the formation of our teeth is related to that. So why should we go against our nature, I suppose?
Well, many herbivorous animals do have canine teeth. Now, I'm not saying that we're strictly herbivores necessarily, but I do think we have choice, and the evidence seems to suggest that quite strongly. So I think that when we look to our history, we've been opportunistic omnivores. We ate what we could to survive. But now we live in a time where we have nutrition information and we have availability and accessibility of all different types of foods. So we actually have choice. And with choice comes the responsibility to make ethical decisions.
So what is your key ethical argument? Is it really about animal rights?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I went vegan and the main pillar of veganism which I promote is that of trying to reduce animal suffering and death. Because what we do to animals for food, we don't have to do. You know, we put 90% of pigs in gas chambers in this country. We take babies away from their mothers. We macerate newborn baby chicks in the egg industry when they're male. So we do a whole host of truly terrible things to animals. And the important thing is we don't have to do those things. So we should stop doing them.
So for you, an animal life is as valuable as a human life?
Not necessarily, but an animal's life is worthy enough to not be reduced to a meal on my dinner plate.
Now, it's interesting in your book. So your book is really about rhetoric. It's about persuasion. You're talking about how to argue with a meat eater.
Right.
What are the key elements of your book? Can you give us any of the tips? I'm not sure how many vegans watch the show.
Well, I hope, yeah, maybe not so many, but the thing I always think is vegans often have an optics problem, right? And I know that viewers of the show may look at me as a vegan and think, well, a vegan activist is going to be judgmental and militant and forceful. And so I know that vegans have an optics problem. And I think that actually the way that we can create genuine conversations is by meeting each other where we're at and dissecting each other's views. Because I don't think that the idea behind veganism is something that we're all at odds at. Everyone here says that we're against animal cruelty, but how about we put that into practice and say, well, if it's wrong to kick a dog, surely it must be immoral to force a pig into a gas chamber or the throat of an animal.
That's a very interesting approach. So you take the view that, and you're right, there is a consensus, isn't there, people are always outraged when an animal is harmed. Remember when that footballer hurt that kitten,
Absolutely.
for instance. So it's just a consensus.
Yeah.
So you can start from that point and sort of bring it out a little bit. But ultimately, will people be open to persuasion? Because it's such a big sort of established way of life, isn't it?
I mean, it's a hard task, don't get me wrong. Sometimes it feels like I'm, rolling the rock up the hill for it to roll back down on top of me again. But I think ultimately people are well-intentioned, they do care about animals, and it's just about encouraging people to think more deeply about their food and to connect with the animals on their plate. So it's a hard task, but change is happening, and I am confident.
So when you talk about the perception of vegans, right, now, I think you're right. There have been, I've seen some evidence of very militant vegan behaviour, and I think a lot of people are concerned because it comes across sometimes as a bit authoritarian. In other words, the choices that they make about their own lifestyles, they want to impose on everyone else. Do you think that's right?
Well, I don't think that's actually the case. I think vegans can be very, vocal, we can be passionate, but we can't force anyone to do anything. The decision that the audience makes tonight when they have dinner or breakfast tomorrow morning is a decision that they make. However, when we talk about authoritarianism being forceful, when we buy meat, dairy and eggs, we're forcing animals to have their lives taken from them, to be mutilated, to be harmed, to be forcibly impregnated. If you compare a vegan and a non-vegan, the non-vegan's far more forceful because a non-vegan makes animals, tens of billions of animals every single year, suffer terribly for the food choices they make.
But as a vegan activist, do you ever despair at some of the tactics of some of your colleagues? I mean, sometimes, for instance, Peter, I can see, can be quite extreme in the way they approach certain things, and they almost become self-satirizing, and I'm not sure if they're helping their own cause by taking that approach.
No, I think there are definitely some tactics which aren't necessarily overall helpful, but the word extreme is interesting. I think the language you use is quite telling. Again, I think to cause harm to someone else is the extreme position, and some tactics may not be very effective to everyone, but when we view these words and we look at the origins of them, we think about what the word extreme means. Well, it's far more extreme to force animals into gas chambers than it is to stand on the street with a provocative placard telling people to stop.
Have you had any success in converting carnivores to the herbivorous life?
I mean, I hope so, yeah. I mean, I've had people signing up to different things, people leave me nice messages. Obviously, it's hard to get a true gauge of the influence that, we as individuals have, but certainly I think there's been a lot of changes, and hopefully as a consequence of my work.
And is that why you've chosen to write this book?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the work that I do is centred around conversations, public speaking, and so I've had an opportunity to stress test a lot of my arguments, meet people from all different walks of life, hunters, farmers, ranchers, whoever it may be, and have conversations like what we're having now. And so it's really about putting that information into a book and hopefully giving it to a vegan or a non-vegan, and at the end of it, hopefully they have a more favourable impression of veganism.
I mean, I'd be very fascinated to see you talking to someone who makes their living from the farming industry.
Yeah.
And perhaps I should have invited someone from that perspective as well. But have you had many of those direct conversations, or is it mostly a kind of online thing?
Oh, I've had many direct conversations on TV, on the streets and in different formats. I know I've had many conversations with farmers, some farmers who, passionately disagreed, but we had good conversations. We met a lot of common ground. And also I've met farmers who used to farm animals who've now transitioned out of that. And so there is a little transition happening even within the farming community. And importantly, we can still have productive and effective conversations even with people who fundamentally disagree with us.
I think that's really important, to be able to disagree politely and to get somewhere civilly and maybe to end up persuading someone. But I just imagine, I mean, maybe it's my prejudice about farmers, but I imagine they'd be quite annoyed by you, and that they do get annoyed by vegans generally.
Well, sometimes, and I think it's understandable. I mean, vegans are, in a way, criticising what they do, quite passionately, of course, and we're asking for them to change. And so I can understand why a farmer might feel that way. But ultimately, what we all want, farmer, vegan, whoever, is a world which is, more sustainable, where we can produce more food to feed more people at a more accessible and affordable price. And veganism is that. So actually, it's about encouraging farmers to reevaluate the way they look after land, the way that they make their money, and ultimately we can create a transition to a fairer and more equitable food system together.
So what about the farmers who will say to you, but we go out of our way to ensure that the animals are only killed humanely and that they are looked after throughout their life and that there's no situation where cruelty is exercised? I understand your point that in some circumstances there is horrible cruelty in abattoirs and the like, but some farmers will say absolutely not, they do not do that. Do you accept that that's the case?
No, absolutely not, because the word humane means having or showing compassion or benevolence. Is it compassionate to cut someone's throat? is it benevolent to force someone into a gas chamber and take their life from them?
Do you draw a distinction, though, between some very bad practices in terms of the slaughter of animals and the maintenance of animals, and those who do try to pursue what they describe as the more humane approach?
Well, the legal, regulated standards are horrifically cruel. They're the ones that allow forced mutilations, the impregnations of animals, the separations of babies, gas chambers. All of these things are regulated by law. Sure, on some farms there may be animals who are kicked and punched, but
I'm thinking of things like foie gras, and where that's a form of torture.
Yeah, but all animal products are a form of torture. When we think about what happens to these animals, when we look at the legal regulated practices, foie gras is terrible. But what we do in this country to the animals here is also terrible. The things that we do legally as well as illegally. So actually, I think that when you look at the word humane, what's more humane, to kill or not to kill?
How successful do you think you will be? I mean, where are we at the moment in terms of numbers? Like, how many... I know that there's been an upsurge of veganisms and people moving to plant-based diets. Do you have any sense of how much of an increase we've seen?
I mean, it's hard to know what population, growth is and different things. Generally, polling shows an upward trend. It's hard to know exactly what that translates to in real terms. What we are seeing, I think, strongly, is an uptake in people becoming more conscious and aware. And even this word flexitarian gets bandied around a lot. I don't necessarily know how it applies to the everyday person, but what I think we are seeing is a growing shift towards people thinking more consciously about their food choices and ultimately making changes.
OK, well, Ed Winter's book is called How to Argue with a Meat Eater, and that is available now, I believe. Is that right?
It's published on the 28th of December, but it's available for pre-ordering now.
Fantastic. Ed, thanks so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And next on Free Speech Nation, Fraser Myers from Spiked Online will be here. We're going to discuss the big free speech stories from 2023 and what we can hope for in 2024. Do not go anywhere.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So, with just a couple of weeks to go until the end of the year, what better time to reflect on the current state of free speech in the UK and around the world? Are advocates of free speech starting to win the argument, or are the forces of repression, censorship and cancel culture only getting stronger and stronger? Spiked Online has always been an advocate of freedom of expression, and Deputy Editor Fraser Myers joins me now. Welcome to the show, Fraser. Thanks for having me. So, free speech, where are we at the moment? Every year I kind of think, are we getting better? Are more people becoming alert to the problem? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I think the picture is quite grim, actually, I think it's fair to say. For us in the UK, you can be arrested for posting a gender-critical tweet. You can have your protest shut down before it even starts on suspicion of causing a public nuisance. You can have your bank account removed from you if you hold contentious political views. And around the world, social media can take down your posts if they are so-called misinformation.
Yes.
That could even encompass things that are true, but that the authorities have decided are wrong in some way.
Why don't people understand why this is a bad thing? I mean, I saw a survey that said that a quarter of Labour voters think it's fine for a bank to debank you if they disagree with what you say in the wake of the Nigel Farage case. Why can't they see that this is going to bite them eventually?
I think that's the issue. I think a lot of the time people think, well, it's only wrong-uns who are being affected.
So people who don't agree with them,
people who don't, yeah. I think there are very few people who understand that why free speech is so important as a principle for all of us, why it matters, that it's not, you know, it's the same for everyone. We're all affected when someone's free speech is harmed. And you kind of see that sometimes where on the right, recently, you know, a lot of people on the right have made a big show of standing up for free speech, but they're sort of indifferent when, say, pro-Palestinian events are shut down or pro-Palestinian people are cancelled, or they will call for the so-called hate marches in London to be banned. So often there is this sort of tit-for-tat when it comes to free speech. People just don't... If it's happening to the other side, they don't really care.
That really worries me. I think you just need to have a consistent stance. I mean, particularly when it comes to protest. You know, I was very worried about the way in which the government snuck through that sort of anti-protest measure before the coronation. And then this recent one that they've put in so that they can effectively ask anyone to leave for whatever reason, and if they don't, they can then arrest them. I mean, this kind of thing shouldn't be going on in a free society, should it?
It's incredibly dangerous, and we saw with the coronation that law came immediately into use, and, you know, sort of anti-monarchy protesters were told their protests would be shut down because they were, you know, there was a suspicion that they might cause a public nuisance. There's a law which is kind of understandable against locking on, where lots of Extinction Rebellion protesters in the past have sort of tied themselves, you know, using bike locks to things. So there was a specific law put into that. But the Republic protesters were accused of having locking-on devices because they had some sort of ties that were just being used to hold their placards together.
Right,
So already that was taken as evidence of, you know, their ill intent. Meanwhile, on the other hand, you know, you see that there's an enormous double standard over these protests. So you have the huge kind of pro-Palestine protests, and there are elements of that that are, you know, genuinely anti-Semitic, genuinely quite hateful, and they are kind of given a free pass by the police. You know, the police have, people might have seen the Metropolitan Police say, well, there are different meanings of jihad, it's not necessarily an arrestable offence. Now, I don't think those people should be arrested. I think they have every right to express their views, no matter how hateful. But I think when, you know, censorship does make hypocrites of us all.
Yes, we've heard a lot about two-tiered policing.
Absolutely. It does drag the police into being political actors.
Yeah, and the police have been very guilty of arresting people, investigating people, sending threatening tweets. They do seem to believe that it's their job to police our thoughts and our words.
Absolutely, and in particular, you've seen that the British police have effectively become the armed wing of gender ideology. You know, recently a woman was hauled before the police, you know, told she would have to do an interview or be arrested because she tweeted things as simple as trans women are women. She said that...
Well, trans women are not.
Sorry, trans women are men. And she said things like, it's mutilation to transition a child. These are perfectly normal opinions for people to hold. These are legal opinions.
But even if they were extreme opinions, surely in a free society we have to be able to stand up for everyone's right to say what they think.
That's absolutely right, and I think, you know, the challenge for us as free speech advocates, I mean, in many ways we've sort of been playing the game on easy mode for a long time because so many of the cases that we see are so patently absurd. Everyone can see that, hang on, that person should not have been arrested, hang on, that person should not have been sacked for saying something relatively normal, for expressing a relatively normal political view. But we have to get better at fighting the more difficult cases.
And what do we make of it? A lot of people will stick by this idea that there is no problem with cancel culture and that there is no problem, particularly on universities, with free speech. What do you make of that?
I mean, it's just delusional. I mean, it doesn't matter how many cases you bring to their attention, they will just refuse to accept it. I think what people do is they will find ways of saying, oh, this isn't a free speech case because it's really about safety or something like that.
Right, yeah.
This isn't a free speech case because it's really about discrimination. So you have to be very wary of that when people try and drag things off the terrain of free speech. When people essentially, or it's harassment is another one, when people essentially say that words, or try to pretend that words are actions, when they clearly are not. Of course, actions should be dealt with completely differently.
And the final challenge, I suppose, will be big tech, won't it? What do you make of it at the moment?
Big tech, I mean, there's some pros and cons. I mean, Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter has been a net positive for free speech. I'm not going to be an Elon Musk cheerleader and pretend that the free speech issue is solved even on X or Twitter, because it plainly hasn't been. But that has been a positive. And one thing that's come out of it is the Twitter files. Now, this year we saw, that's been going on for a couple of years, different things have been coming out, but this year something really interesting came out where we saw how Twitter was working with Stanford University and to determine what is mis and disinformation. And often some of the things that they were considering disinformation or misinformation were plainly true, they just had the wrong political outcome.
Wow.
So Anthony Fauci's genuine emails, for instance, caused a lot of concern among these academics because they might undermine distrust in science.
Yes.
Not because they're actually wrong, but because they're right, and it might give the wrong impression to people.
I mean, that's very dangerous. So ultimately, we can't really trust the government, we can't trust big tech. We should... Free speech for all is a great general principle because that solves everything, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You cannot trust anyone else to be in charge of what you are allowed to say or think, because we all have our own biases, we all have our own problems, and, you know, no one in power it can make these decisions well. Clearly, you know, I don't think there's any such thing as good censorship. But if you were looking at what gets censored today, in Britain, in America, in the Western world, you would say that is an absurd, untenable situation. Entirely mainstream opinions are being censored.
Absolutely. Very scary stuff. All right, Fraser Myers, thanks so much for joining me tonight. Thank you. And next on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be hearing some good news for free speech to end 2023 after a teacher in America won a landmark case, having been fired because he avoided referring to a female student by male pronouns. See you shortly.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you.
every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. There was a win for free speech in America this week when the Virginia Supreme Court ruled it would reinstate a lawsuit alleging it was a violation of teacher Peter Vlaming's rights to fire him for avoiding the use of personal pronouns to describe one of his students. Peter Vlaming was represented by ADF International, and Lois McClatchy, the Senior Legal Communications Officer at ADF UK, joins me now. Lois, welcome to the show. Oh, she hasn't turned up quite yet, but we will get Lois on the line shortly. Do you know about this case, Jonathan? Have you heard about this one, Peter Vlaming? He went out of his way, actually, because of the social transitioning of the student, to actually avoid saying pronouns at all. Now, that strikes me as quite a cunning way of dealing with it, right?
It sounds quite a funny, passive-aggressive, quite funny way. It's like almost like a sketch, isn't it? Like
well,
not saying
I suppose so, but what's worrying about the case was that, in a sense, therefore, he wasn't being punished for what he said. He was being punished for what he did not say.
Which is compelled speech.
Which is compelled speech.
And I don't believe in compelled speech, man. That's how I learned about Jordan Peterson.
That was supposed to be a Jordan Peterson impersonation.
It wasn't very good. I can do Ben Shapiro. Well, actually, my name is Ben Shapiro, and I don't think you should be driving very conservatively down this height. That's about as good as I can go.
All right, this isn't an impersonation show, Jonathan. So, Lewis, what...
And now the thing about Bill Cosby...
Stop it. Lewis Schaefer, what do you make of this? I mean, do you think that, you know, if you're a teacher in a class and a pupil says, can you call me something else, and can you use pronouns that are inaccurate for me? As a teacher, you should be able to say no, right?
You should be able to say no, but you should be able to say, what is the nice thing to do at the end of the day? I know I seem like a horrible person.
You do.
I do. But at the end of the day, if somebody wants to call you, and you call them what they want to be called.
OK, so say one of your sons came home and said, Dad, I want you to call me she, her. Would you mind? You ponder on that. We're going to get Lois McClatchy in from ADF.
He's just happy they're
Lois,
cool.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Lois. Apologies for the technical difficulties there. Can you tell me what has happened in the case of Peter Vlaming? It does seem a bit disturbing because he had actually gone out of his way to avoid pronouns so that this wouldn't be an issue. Isn't that right?
That's right. Well, the government should not be requiring that teachers affirm something they don't believe to be true simply to keep their jobs. That's definitely not a good situation for us to be in. But in the case of Peter Vlaming, he was treated very, very poorly. Now, he was a popular French teacher in his school. Ironically, French being one of the languages where getting gender right is very, very important. And he was a popular teacher. A student came to him and said that they wanted to be referred to in a different gender. They worked out a plan together where he would address her in the name that was chosen, but he would not be able to change the language that he used to affirm a different ideology to which he believed. Both parties are very happy with this arrangement, but unfortunately later down the line, when the school board got involved, they gave him an ultimatum, and they said either you must change the way that you use pronouns to affirm something that you don't believe, or essentially be fired. And he was not able to violate his conscience to change that. Fortunately, now 5 years later, and it's been a long haul, a long drag through the courts, through which time he has not been able to resume his teaching career, remember. Finally, we have this great ruling from the court, which has upheld the right to religious freedom and has given a very, very strong ruling in favour of teachers being able to exercise their rights to freedom of speech. So that is a great ruling today. Obviously, we wish that poor Peter had never had to go through this, had never had his career destroyed by this moment. So we hope going forward that this can be a meaningful ruling that will impact many more teachers.
Well, Lewis McClatch here. Thanks for being so concise on that. I'm sorry we're out of time, but thank you for joining me on the show tonight. So there's plenty more to come on Free Speech Nation between now and 9 o'clock, so please do not go anywhere at all.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. There is plenty of weather to keep us occupied over the course of this coming week, and that starts off even on Sunday evening and night. This band of rain spreading its way across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England, southwest Scotland, even into parts of Wales as well. The southeastern areas of England will hold on to a few clearer spells, and also in the northwest of Scotland we'll see some clear spells overnight that will allow temperatures to drop off down into mid-single figures or so. But where you are stuck underneath all that cloud and rain will be another mild night, not seeing much lower than 10 to 12 degrees Celsius. That rain will slowly push its way southwards as we head throughout the day. So there will be some early brightness in the southeast, but the cloud will tend to thicken up its way in here, and into the afternoon it's going to be parts of Northern Ireland into central areas of Scotland that start to see the sun poke its way in, and the winds will also be easing out in the north, but still quite blustery for England and Wales. Once again, generally temperatures above average for the time of year, between 10 and 13 degrees Celsius. On Tuesday, our attention turns to this next area of frontal systems that are going to push their way in from the southwest. So it's looking like Wales and England that are going to bear the brunt of the rainfall on Tuesday. Could be a very wet rush hour period first thing on the day. Lots of spray on the roads when you are travelling. That will eventually clear its way off, and behind that you'll see those sunnier spells pushing in from the northwest, but also with some scattered showers. They could be wintry over the higher ground areas of Scotland. It's that theme of sunshine and showers that will continue into the second half of the week, with some strong winds still around at times as well. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation this week. We'll be discussing the row in France over the showing of a painting of a nude woman to Muslim pupils, and we're also going to talk about the concerning rise in Holocaust denial. And there'll be another chance for this wonderful audience to grill myself, Jonathan and Lewis. But let's get a news update first from Polly Middlehurst.
Andrew, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB Newsroom tonight is that the Home Office says it does have robust plans in place for migrant flights to go to Rwanda, following reports that some airlines are refusing to take part in the government's illegal migration policy. It's after the Deputy Prime Minister said Rishi Sunak was right to warn that illegal migration could overwhelm European states. Oliver Dowden insisted the government's Rwanda plan will work and is an essential step towards getting a grip on the problem.
We will make sure that we have the right piece of legislation. It's not about keeping one part of the party happy or another part of the happy. Look, I'm confident that the Prime Minister has looked at this very carefully and has got the best possible measures. But if there are ways of improving it further, just as with any piece of legislation, we'll work with backbench members of Parliament, including Conservatives. If we can make it even better, of course we'll do that.
Oliver Dowden. Now, Baroness Michelle Mone has admitted that she failed to reveal her links to a company which supplied PPE gowns to the NHS during the COVID-19 pandemic. MedPro is the company concerned. It's currently being investigated by the National Crime Agency, and the Department of Health is taking action over a breach of contract. She told the BBC that she made an error by not revealing her links to the company, which in the end meant her husband's trust received around £60 million of taxpayers' money. But she also said that lying to the media wasn't a crime. International news, and there's been growing pressure on Israel, with David Cameron joining Germany's Foreign Affairs Minister in calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. In a joint article in the Sunday Times newspaper today, the new Foreign Secretary warned that too many civilians have lost their lives, and he said it's time for a sustainable ceasefire. The intervention is a significant shift in the government's tone on Israel's war against Hamas. A couple have become one of the first same-sex partnerships to receive a blessing at a Church of England service. The prayers of love and faith, now allowed to be used in general services, were given to Catherine Bond and Jane Pierce this morning. The House of Bishops sanctioned the blessings just days ago, but there's been no legislative change. It remains a voluntary decision for ministers. Wet weather is on the way for Scotland. The Met Office issuing an amber weather warning. That means there could be a danger to life. Up to 8 inches of rain was forecast for this weekend. More is on its way, and experts are saying it will cause travel disruption, flooding and possible landslides. People are being urged to take great care. And finally, a cheese that's been dubbed brutal for its smell is proving very popular this Christmas. It's called the Minger. It's made in the Highlands of Scotland. It's now on sale in British supermarkets for the first time, despite its extreme smell. While the maker of the cheese agree there's no objective way to know if the Minger is the pongiest cheese ever made, he thinks it pretty much could be. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So let's get some more questions from this delightful studio audience. Our first question comes from Marcus. Where's Marcus? Hello.
Hi. Was Elon Musk right to reinstate Alex Jones?
Well, this has been an interesting one. We all remember Alex Jones was kicked off Twitter, which has now become X, and he's considered a very controversial figure. Now, I believe that Elon Musk put up a sort of poll and sort of said to the crowd, you know, what do you think? And he would make any decision that we decided. And people said that the InfoWars star, Alex Jones, should come back. But this is controversial, isn't it, Jonathan? Because Alex Jones has advanced some very strange conspiracy theories, some quite horrible ones about how the Sandy Hook massacre didn't happen, things like that.
Yeah, the Sandy Hook was a real misstep, absolutely. That misstep is under exaggeration there. That was bad, but you know, and he's
so
he's
should
paying
Elon
the
Musk not have brought him back?
I don't necessarily think so. Not that. I think I'm really struggling today.
Aren't you?
Yeah. No. Okay. I'll slow down. I think it's okay that they brought him back. You know, you don't have to follow him if you don't like him. If you think his opinions are... He's been right about some things. He was right about Epstein's Island 10 years ago. He was trying to bring that to people's attention.
Well, I suppose, isn't the point not whether you agree with Alex Jones or not, because I actually think that's irrelevant. I think the point is that if you say you're a social media platform that is open to anyone, then be open to anyone and be open to all opinions.
Sure.
Right?
And if he's not breaking any laws, then, yeah, it's a private platform. Elon can bring him back if he wants.
But Elon Musk knew that by doing this, he would actually damage the potential for Twitter or X to accrue advertisers. So actually, he's taking a principled stance here, isn't he? Whether you agree with Alex Jones or not, which, like I say, I don't think is relevant here.
I think the advertiser battle is lost.
Well, it is lost
now.
because Elon Musk has said in a recent interview to advertisers who threatened to boycott him, he said, "Go F yourself." Right? Then there's no way they're going to come to the platform now. I mean,
well, there might be. They might just think, well, we like the platform. The thing about this, I think it's lost. It's similar to here at GB News. It's like we're trying to be nice to the advertisers. Sainsbury's isn't advertising with us, so why should we try to be nice? Oh, please come and advertise on GB News. No, we should be like Elon Musk and just say, screw you.
Yeah, we don't need your money.
Yeah, well, we'd like it, and you know.
Well, actually, that's a very different issue, Lewis, because I think the advertising boycott against this channel is completely unjust and has been stirred up by crazy activists who've claimed that the channel is something that it isn't. I mean, they never watch it. It's like they don't know what it is they're criticising. It's absolutely bizarre.
And Twitter is unjust because Twitter is just a platform. There are horrible people. There are good people on it.
Well, that's right.
So it's also unjust with them. When all the chickens have been plucked, the fact is that Twitter, X, is way more interesting than any other platform.
Except for GB News.
Except for GB News.
Yes.
And let them have a go at it. No one's talking about what's on Threads, which is Facebook.
Very true. And Elon calls himself a free speech absolutist, and he's shown that he is. And so,
yeah. Okay. Very interesting. Well, let's move on now to a question from Phil. Where is Phil? Hi.
Is support declining for LGBTQ plus groups?
I'm glad you said the whole thing. Well, you did. It should be LGBTQIA plus. 2S plus. Anyway, don't worry about it.
What's a 2S? Two-Spirit?
The 2S is Two-Spirit, yes. Anyway, this is actually an interesting story that broke this week, that apparently, according to a report from the Public Religion Research Institute, support for gay and transgender people is declining amongst the American public. I don't think we should be all that surprised about this personally. I mean, the problem is that we've had, well, let's call it TQ plus activists pushing incredibly divisive policies, being really hostile. Activists have been threatening people with violence. Police have been arresting people for misgendering and all sorts of stuff. When you get activists behaving like this, it turns people away from their cause. We've seen this with Just Stop Oil, haven't we? Same sort of thing.
And what Matey over there was saying about the veganism thing is that when you have very sort of forceful and argumentative people, it's going to turn people off you, so it's an optics thing.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, so many, you know, whenever I get a tweet that either threatens me with death or says something really, really horrible, I know that they're going to have pronouns in their bio.
Sure.
I don't even have to click through. It's just absolutely, it's always the case, right? I've never been proven wrong with that. So there is something essentially aggressive within the trans activist movement. There's a kind of a relishing of bullying, and that puts people off. And the problem with that is then, and that also they're pushing within schools really sexually explicit material for kids and stuff like that. And the problem with that is gay people get tagged in. People think this is gay people doing this. It's not. It's not that at all. It's the activists. It's trans activists who, by the way, also don't represent trans people, I should say.
Right. And you've also seen you have like the LGB Alliance.
Yes.
They're trying to almost distance themselves because of this negative association.
Absolutely. And they're right to do so.
Right. Okay.
Because the interests of same-sex attracted people is not the same as the interests of people who believe they have a gendered soul. It's a totally different... It's not even connected.
I've always found it a bit curious how so many different things are being contained into one group.
Yeah, it's very odd.
That almost feels a bit... I don't know, patronising to say that, oh, you guys are all the same, you all have the same interests. Well, of course not.
No, exactly.
And no two people do.
You know that, don't you, Lewis? I mean,
I know it.
Yeah.
I know it. It's like I like raisins. I love raisins. I mean, I try not to eat them because they're so addictive and they're Moorish, but I don't like them in my fresh fruit salad. And
I'm sensing a metaphor here.
And it is a metaphor, and that's what the whatever it is, whatever all those letters are, is the T is basically raisins being lumped in with the fresh fruits, or vice versa, or the fresh fruits.
You're calling me a fruit?
Yes, I'm using.
Can't say that. No, I know exactly what you're trying to say here.
Yeah.
I was just trying to get you in trouble.
I'm making your point.
You're making my point.
I made your point. But at the end of the day, in my household, we're more gay-friendly.
You are. I'm glad to hear it. Anyway, let's move on to another question now. This is from Matthew. Where's Matthew?
Yeah.
Hello.
Good evening. Do you think Great Britain should return the Elgin Marbles to Greece?
That's very interesting, Matthew. I had a conversation with Tiffany Jenkins, an academic, last week on the show. She was being very balanced, actually, but I think her overall case is that we should not return them. Do you have a view about this?
I'm not sure, really, but I correct me if I'm wrong, I thought Lord Elgin actually purchased them from the Ottomans. So
yes, absolutely. He had permission.
Second,
yeah,
the original owner.
Well, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because the Ottoman Empire were also colonisers, and you know they at the time had the rights, I suppose you'd call them in modern parlance, and they did give Lord Elgin the right to take the marbles. So there's a big sort of debate, but this is all flared up again because Lord Frost, who's the former Brexit minister, is now saying that we should hand the Elgin marbles back to Greece. I'm torn on this, Lewis, I genuinely am, because on the one hand, I recognise that having them in the British Museum is wonderful because we can go and see them whenever we want. They are incredible things to see. You see them in a really interesting context within the British Museum. And in fact, had Elgin not taken the marbles, they would have been quite severely damaged. And there's all sorts of arguments for why we should keep them in the UK. But on the other hand, I've been to the Acropolis Museum in Athens, and I can see the gaps. You know, they have the sort of plaster casts to show what's missing. And I kind of felt it would be nice if they were all together again. And I might be able to appreciate them more in Athens, you know, with the view of the Acropolis, from the Acropolis Museum. Artistically, I think that would be more satisfying. Right. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I stand on being nice. And
but what's nicer? To keep the marbles here so that they can be seen by so many people, or return them to Greece so they can be seen by people there?
These Greek people, we need them as our friends.
Yes.
They're one of our few friends. They're right next to us every single Olympic Games, Great Britain, Greece. So we're going to have to deal with them.
So your argument is we return the marbles.
And we need them, and they were taken by the Ottomans, who were the enemies of the Greek people. So did the Ottomans have a right to take them in the first place? Maybe they didn't. At the end of... Yes.
Yes, we should return the marbles.
What we should do is we should give it back to them, and then say, can we hold on to it for a little bit longer?
Yeah, but Lewis, OK, but if you start doing that and saying...
Why don't you listen? Because the people can sense there's some reason there.
No, look, yeah, there's a glimmer of reason in what you're saying. But,
yeah.
Lewis, but it's a slippery slope, isn't it? Because if you say that all museums have to repatriate everything that they have, the British Museum would be empty, for one thing, because they plundered quite a lot. Right? And that's why we have so many great things to look at. Right? So do you think that every museum worldwide should return everything that it owns or has taken?
You're making me change my position on this.
Well, I'm not making you. I
agree with you that it's better at the British Museum. The reason why the Parthenon, first of all, they're called the Elgin Marbles, which is such a misnomer. It's just named after some guy. They were on the Parthenon.
Yeah.
Everybody knows the Parthenon. Screw this guy Elgin, whatever. And I have family members up in Elgin, and screw those people.
No, that's a place.
Oh, sorry.
This is a guy.
Yeah. But you are right. It's actually the fact that they are at the British Museum is like a traveling road show for Greece. It makes Greece actually seem like an important place still, when they're totally even more irrelevant than we English people are.
OK, there we go. That's Lewis's idea that English people are irrelevant and Greeks too.
What if the Greeks had them every other weekend? That could be a thing.
Actually, no, that might be a way to do it, like with the divorced family with the kids.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem with that is they're very heavy. I think the transportation costs get quite high if you do that.
Oh, well, let them work that out.
OK.
Exactly.
Right, so
It's
we
all
haven't really
Greek
got an
to me.
answer to that, but it's interesting to talk about anyway. We've got a question now from John. Where's John? Hi, John.
Hello. This is a question which looks forward to 2024.
Oh, yes.
And given the opportunity, which ex-Prime Minister would you bring into the Cabinet to help out in 2024?
That's interesting.
And you can have anybody, alive or dead, except Churchill.
Except Churchill?
Except Churchill.
Who would you bring back?
Oh, Harold Macmillan.
Ah, OK.
You never had it so good. He should have said, you will never have it so good.
Well, I think I would quite like the Duke of Wellington to come back. You know, he was an oddball. He kept a dagger in his umbrella. He had an umbrella disguised.
Benjamin Disraeli.
Good one.
Yep.
The Jewish guy.
Did he?
Yeah.
Ah!
I changed my mind. I thought that's why you were suggesting.
No, I just wanted to sound smart.
Oh, OK.
Chaucer.
Liz Truss.
Liz Truss, yeah, she's a buddy of mine now.
Yeah, you met her the other night at the Christmas party.
Yeah.
I think Liz Truss actually should be given another go because I feel bad for her. She did not have enough time to really get to grips with she was chased out just for implementing that mini budget, which I think actually could have worked.
Yeah.
If they'd have stuck with it.
And I actually agree with you, Andrew, because she'd get in and she'd be angry. She'd be as angry as Donald Trump is today, and she would do all the things that a Conservative Party should do, and all the things she might not have done at the time.
That's where they think she went wrong. Is that she was too conservative?
Yeah, my favorite is Golda Meir.
Ah, yeah. That would be interesting.
She was a tough woman, the president of Israel.
Yeah, different country, but yeah.
But you did say prime minister. You didn't say prime minister.
That's true. What about Gordon Brown? I mean, would be quite interesting. You know, he used to eat 4 Kit Kats a day.
He did.
And I think for that reason alone, we should give him another go.
That's what made his eye all wonky.
Let's get a question from Alan. Where's Alan? Same Alan as before.
Hi, guys. Me again. Sorry to put this one on you. I know you're all comedians, so I've got a serious political question for you now. If Rishi Sunak was actually the cat in number 10, how many political lives would he have left?
Yeah, it's interesting because it does strike me that Rishi Sunak's days are numbered. I just don't think he has any lives left.
Believes in reincarnation, right? As part of his religion.
Does he?
Yeah, he's celebrating a Hindu.
I don't know about his personal beliefs, but if you say so, Jonathan, that's...
Well, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I could be wrong. I think he's
made a lot of mistakes, though, hasn't he?
Has Rishi made a lot of mistakes? Printed quite a lot of money during the lockdown.
OK.
That was, a bit.
But he behaved like a proper socialist during lockdown.
He did. He went full helicopter ride. It was a tough time for him. But and what do I think? I was about to do a bunch of Jeff Norcott jokes, but I decided against it because they're his.
They're his jokes, so don't do that. Absolutely.
No, Rishi's fine. I don't really know that much about him, but God bless him.
He seems like a nice guy, but what I mean is I just don't think he's been a particularly successful Prime Minister.
No, I don't think so. I think he was sort of walking into a losing battle there.
Well, also, he's not, you need a Conservative in charge of the Conservative Party. I don't think that's controversial, is it?
No, it's not. And it's not that he's done some wrong things. He is wrong. He is wrong for the Conservative Party. He's a globalist. He's
Team World.
Team World. I knew you would say that phrase.
And at the end of the day, the people, the Conservative Party doesn't want a Team World leader.
On that, Lewis, America, what's your prediction? Is it going to be Trump or Biden?
I think something is going to happen, and I think Trump is going to die.
Trump is going to die?
Yeah.
That's not what I was asking. You've completely thrown me there with this left field prognostication.
I think Trump is going to be...
Out of the two of them, you think Trump's going to die?
Yeah, I was going to say...
Fair enough.
Well, not that I received a phone call about this.
Well, if something happens to Trump, the FBI are going to be giving you a phone call.
I know, as I say, really, it's possible.
Absolutely.
They're already outside his house.
I just have my gut feeling is it's not going to be what... Even because everyone's focusing on the Democrats, what are the Democrats going to do?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of room in this game. It's over a year before the election, or almost a year.
Yeah.
Before the election.
It might not be Biden then.
And if you look at Donald Trump, I mean, he doesn't look that healthy. He's
he looks all right.
He looks all right compared to Biden.
Yeah, exactly. Because Biden can't speak.
Yeah, can't speak, but that doesn't mean that Trump isn't. Trump's on the golf course.
Why do they always have elderly statesmen? Why not just get someone who's a bit younger? I'm not saying like someone in their 30s or 40s, but someone in their 60s would do it. Someone a bit spry. A Ron DeSantis type.
Unfortunately, when you have sort of an open democracy, it doesn't work out the way we want it to.
No, that's true.
Right.
I think they should get younger people. Anyway, I'm not being ageist. I just think, when there's a risk of expiring, it makes an election a harder prospect, doesn't it? OK, look, next up on Free Speech Nation, we'll have two guests here to discuss the row which erupted in France when Muslim pupils were shown a 17th century painting of nude women in an art class. See you in a moment.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. A teacher in France says she fears for her life after showing a 17th century Renaissance painting to her pupils during the class. It was a painting of Diana and Actaeon. It depicts nude women, and complaints were made by some Muslim parents. Meanwhile, staff members went on strike on Monday in solidarity with the teacher involved. The incident occurred in the same week that 6 teenagers were convicted for their role in the 2020 killing of teacher Samuel Paty, who they identified to a radicalised Islamist. So joining me to discuss this, the human rights activist and businessman Shakil Afsar and the artist and author Alexander Adams. Welcome both to the show. Shakil, I want to come to you first. A lot of people are concerned because they would say that in an art class in a school, you would have to show works of art that will feature nudity, that is, it's a kind of inevitable aspect of Western artistic culture. Do you take that view, or do you think the teacher should have been more mindful of some of the sensibilities of the pupils in the class?
Well, absolutely. I think with the current situation that's happening in France and the fact that Muslims are being vilified and discriminated by the government, I think that the school should have had a bit more sensitivity in pushing this forward. The simple fact that we see this happening in the United Kingdom with the extreme LGBT indoctrination that's being forced on our children by individual teachers. unfortunately, the personal beliefs, the personal values, and the personal stance of a teacher is not what our children should be privy to. Our children should be privy to information that shows them about the great society they live in without infringing on their morals, values, and most importantly, religious convictions.
Do you accept the point that when you're learning about art, when learning about Western art in particular, that some of the most important and significant artworks do feature nudity? If you take the Sistine Chapel, for instance, Michelangelo's David, I mean, surely children ought to be introduced to great art when the opportunity arises.
Yeah, well, look, they should be introduced to everything that represents the great societies that we live in. But what we must remember, if parents have concerns in regards to age appropriateness, and we must remember that this is not only a Muslim issue, this is actually an Abrahamic faith issue. This is surrounding people who hold their religion very close to their heart, whether they be Christians, Jews, or Muslims. You know, we should educate our children. We should, teach them about the vibrant societies that we have. But like I said before, we must not infringe on the parents' concerns and the fact that, the parents' right for age appropriateness. The children should be learning about everything in a way that is not upsetting the main stakeholders in any school, which is the parents and the students.
Do you take Shakil's point that actually just nude paintings, even if it is a great work of art from the 17th century, that is age inappropriate? Do you think that's right?
Not quite. I think that nudity in itself isn't so much of a problem. I think sexualized nudity, so there are certain classical works of art that are paintings or particularly Greek vases, which are actually extremely sexually explicit, and I would say that these are perhaps not appropriate. But I think that paintings of myths or biblical scenes which include aspects of nudity, such as you can see on the screen at the moment, they are not sexually explicit, so I think that they should be included. I think that children of all faiths need to be exposed to this kind of art because it helps to explain the situation they're in, because they will go out into their cities and they will see these sculptures out in public forums, they will see them on public buildings, they will see them on fountains, and for example. So they really need to know what these depict and what they mean. They may decide that they are sinful and they may decide that they reject it and they dislike these things, but they need to be educated about them first, and then they can make their decision according to their own personal beliefs, logic, or just their cultural beliefs, their religion.
So, Shakil, do you accept this point that, when it comes to the causing of offence, which is, I think, partly what you're talking about, that sometimes we can't possibly make provisions of that kind? For instance, some pupils may have religious beliefs that find the theory of evolution offensive, but does that mean that we ought not to teach the theory of evolution in science classes in schools?
No, I kind of concur with what your other guest is saying, but what my point is that if parents have issues in regards to age appropriateness, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be taught, but it should be taught in a stage where parents feel that their children are at an age to understand what they're being seen. A lot of the time, that what we must understand, people from Abrahamic faith religions, the Jewish community, the Christian community, and the Muslim community have a conversation about sexuality with their children at a very later stage than other communities, and this is something that we must respect. The fact that we live in a society where we should be catering for all people, and we've seen this happen before. The teacher might have felt that she was doing nothing wrong or he was doing nothing wrong, but we've had the same issue with the rampant LGBT indoctrination, where teachers felt that on the guise of equality, it was okay to teach children that a boy can become a girl can become a boy. So it's all, for me, in regards to, it's about age appropriateness and, most importantly, parental concerns. If parents have concerns, those concerns shouldn't be likened with extremist terrorist attacks that have took previously. Parents have a right to speak without, linking them to incidents that have happened in the past. Unfortunately, it then leaves the parents to be open to be, discriminated, under no basis whatsoever.
I suppose, Alexander, is there a distinction to be drawn here between what Shakil is describing, which is in the indoctrination of students into belief systems that their families may not hold, such as the idea that human beings can change sex, which is obviously a belief system, and what it means, what art is all about? I mean, art is not about the propaganda of belief systems. Art is something completely different. Isn't that distinction something that we would be wise to draw?
Yes and no. I mean, I think it's very difficult to divorce politics from art, because you'll find that a lot of art that was made with reference to supposedly classical myths or portraits are, for example, commissioned by very powerful people to display their wealth and to say that, you know, our dynasty is the correct dynasty to rule this particular country and so forth. So there is an element of politics in all art. But I agree that art can be appreciated largely without politics, but you do need that informed information. You do need to be led into this by an educator, and that it's absolutely, and it bleeds out into all areas. So, for example, Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, which is the drawing of the man with his arms and legs outspread. This is an example of not only of the Renaissance art, but of humanism, of the beginning of the scientific method and so forth. And it's a key image in the history of Western culture. So it needs to be shown. But obviously, yes, but it's obviously a new figure. I think the problem is that once you start taking into account the Abrahamic faiths, which obviously I'm sort of very sympathetic towards, you come up against something which is that there is a prescription against graven images in all the three religions. So it says that you must not depict anything at all. So if you went with the most conservative approach from Jews, Muslims and Christians, then you would not have any art taught or displayed in schools at all, which I think would be a problem.
I think this would be very difficult. Shaquille, can I just ask you about that? Because I think as a teacher, I would struggle to anticipate that the kind of image that we're talking about, that 17th century painting of Diana and Actaeon, I see that picture and I would never anticipate that would cause offence, because as Alexander says, it's not a sexualised image. So what would your view be? Would it be that teachers ought to be hyper cautious, that if there's any nudity whatsoever, they should run that past the parents first? I mean, how would this work on a practical basis?
Well, on a practical basis, you know, they could simply, if they can identify that they have a class full of Abrahamic faith students, they can be, you know, mindful to the religious concerns that those students have. You know, you can show an image without actually showing certain parts of that image that they might find offensive. So there are ways to depict art, and there are ways to show the children the vibrant art that exists in our society without actually offending them. If a group of people are feeling offended and are feeling that their religious beliefs are not being adhered to by them looking at a specific picture, surely as a society, as a, you know, an open marketplace of views, we would cater for these people, because what they are only asking is the fact that it is against their religion. And I understand that the teachers are only asking that they want to show this vibrant art, and surely we can meet somewhere in the midpoint. You know, it shouldn't just be you have to see this and that is only it. Surely in a society and as, you know, humans, we can learn to live and coexist with one another and appreciate and understand each other's concerns.
Does it trouble you at all, Shaquille, that so often in these cases it escalates into these big arguments where there are threats and people feel that their lives are endangered? And we saw this in the Batley Grammar School, of course, event, and that teacher is still in hiding as a result of complaints from religious groups. Does it concern you that we end up in that kind of situation where people think that there's a possible threat of violence?
Yeah, well, absolutely. That is very concerning. You know, any sort of disheartened in our community, any sort of divide in our community is never a good thing. But what you must understand is Muslims, Christians and Jews, unfortunately, across the globe are being persecuted, and they're being persecuted in schools under the guise of equality. So you can only understand when a certain situation comes up, and this has been happening for the last couple of years, especially in the United Kingdom. There was a major uproar in 2019 where I was actually taken into the High Court because I asked my nephew's head teacher why she was giving my nephew a book that would suggest a transgender lifestyle as being acceptable without consulting his parent. So the point is, I understand that, you know, both sides of the argument, but what we must understand and what we must grasp is these are people who hold their religious beliefs very close to their heart. These are people who are understanding, and I understand and condemn any form of extremism. You know, we must not get on to the most extreme side of things. We must be, you know, a peace-loving community, a peace-loving nation, but a community who's being continuously vilified. You know, the Abrahamic faiths are continuously being battered and, you know, targeted. You can only understand for the heightened issues that are happening. But again, they should be pushing their concerns in a respectful, peace-loving manner.
Is the problem, Alexander, to come to you on this, is the problem that it is being interpreted as an attack on faith? I mean, I have absolutely no doubt that an art teacher showing an image like that is not at all attempting to attack anyone's religious belief, but that people are taking it that way. Is that really the problem here?
Well, I mean, you could say that they're educating people about the classical religion of Greece. Also, a lot of Western art, of course, is to do with the Bible. It comes from the Bible, and a lot of it is sort of to do with matters from the Old Testament. So these would be familiar for Muslim students as well. But I think that there is an assault on religion, and there is a great deal of hostility towards all of the Abrahamic faiths. So I'm kind of sympathetic. I do understand why Muslims feel that their concerns are not taken as seriously, because this is also
the art teacher was attempting to attack anyone's faith by showing this image.
I don't think that the teacher was doing that at all. They were simply talking about art, and they were presenting a good example of classical mythological painting, which is the sort of thing that children in France would see. In sort of civic buildings, they would see, like Liberty Leading the People, which is a painting by Delacroix, is a painting of a woman showing her breasts, and she's leading the revolutionaries across the barricade in 1848. And this is a national symbol, so this is a symbol of France, a woman with her breasts bared. Now, obviously, this is a little bit difficult for Muslims and conservative Christians to take, but you need to understand what this means and why it's so important to the French people, even if ultimately you think it's inappropriate or wrong.
Very interesting. I'm afraid we're out of time, but thank you both ever so much for joining me, Shaquille and Alexander. Thank you. And next up on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be discussing a study which shows a very concerning number of young people who now think that the horrors of the Holocaust are actually a myth. Do not go anywhere.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. A concerning new poll carried out by The Economist and YouGov suggests there is a worrying rise in Holocaust denial. The results suggest that more than a fifth of young Americans aged between 19 and 29 agree with the statement that the Holocaust is a myth, with a further 30% neither agreeing nor disagreeing with the statement. So Frank Furedi, the Emeritus Professor of Sociology at the University of Kent, has been writing about this study. He joins me now. Frank, this is incredibly concerning. When I saw those statistics, I almost didn't believe in their veracity. Can it be the case that Holocaust denialism is now rife on university campuses?
I think so. I think what's very interesting is that in the old days, Holocaust denial was much more linked to people who are uneducated, kind of peasants, working class people who are sometimes drawn towards the far right. Whereas now Holocaust denial has gone mainstream on many campuses, particularly in the Anglo-American world. And I think what this really represents to me is the corrosive impact of identity politics, because very often the key issues which are important for identity politics are the ones that kind of grab the imagination of young people. And somehow they've kind of come together with a kind of pro-Hamas, anti-Jewish and sort of ideal, where it's very easy to then make that conceptual leap and argue that, in fact, Jews are not victims, the Holocaust is a myth. It's been all one big conspiracy to fool people.
To what extent do you think this is connected with recent events in Gaza? Because I've seen on social media, of course, but also in the mainstream commentariat, an incredible willingness to ignore facts that are inconvenient for one's particular perspective. I mean, I'm not imagining this, am I?
No, you're not. I think one of the interesting things is that the Holocaust has become weaponized, and very often there's almost like a real desire to kind of almost turn the Holocaust around and blame the Jews for committing Holocaust in Gaza. So there's an attempt to almost relieve the burden of the old Holocaust, that somehow that was just no different than what's happening in Gaza today. And I think this kind of dishonest way of using terms like genocide and Holocaust actually leads to a situation where the moral content of what the Holocaust was becomes totally trivialized. And this is something that I think has really crystallized into a very dangerous, very corrosive sort of ideal that allows anti-Semitism to flourish in many domains of our lives. But I should point out that if you look at a number of studies that have been carried out for the last 15, 20 years, you'll see there's been a steady rise in Holocaust denial in many parts of Europe and also in America. And that's to do with the way in which hatred for Israel has somehow converged with an attempt to, in a sense, to turn the Holocaust into something that is, where Jews are dispossessed of their relationship to the Holocaust.
I mean, it's been very interesting to see, because I've always found it baffling that Holocaust denialism could be a thing, given the overwhelming and incontestable evidence for it. But then we've seen in recent weeks people openly denying what happened a few months ago to Jewish people on October the 7th. I mean, do you think that this is partly escalated because of social media, because of the conditions of our time, or do you think that this has always been a tendency?
I think there's always been a tendency on the part of people to see what they want to see and not to see what's in front of their eyes if it challenges their way of being. And what's happened now is that kind of blindness to reality is actually sort of avowed and promoted through the social media. You have to remember that the very minute that Hamas itself is glorifying all the terrible thing it did on October the 7th, the very minute it's doing that, you've got all these new videos coming out that suggest that the Israelis have just invented this, that this is just a conspiracy to fool people, that actually the atrocities never occurred. And what I find particularly interesting is you have all these feminist organizations who, every time a woman says that they've been attacked, say, believe the woman, believe the woman, believe the woman. When it comes to Israeli women being raped in the southern part of their country and really humiliated, all of a sudden you don't believe the woman. On the contrary, you accuse those women who've been in a most horrific way abused of lying and making the story up. So what we got here is almost like a parallel universe that's been created in between different sides of the argument. And that is something particularly disturbing because it makes it impossible for us to have any kind of point of contact, any kind of discussion, because we see two very, very different things.
Very worrying indeed. Frank Ferretti, thank you so much for joining me tonight. And next up on Free Speech Nation, Michelle Mone tries to defend the indefensible, Queers for Palestine shut down Manhattan Bridge, and Just Stop Oil have a go at ruining Christmas. It's almost time for social sensations. Don't go anywhere.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Are Queer, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, Labour have no interest in tackling immigration. In My Take a 10, Gary Lineker is destroying the BBC and he doesn't care. Is modern society forgetting the importance of mothers? I'll be asking Edwina Currie. Plus, would Margaret Thatcher have stopped the boats? We'll ask her former top advisor. And keep the kids up. Father Christmas joins me live in the studio. See you at 9.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So it's time for Social Sensations. That's the part of the show where we look at what's been going viral this week on social media. And first up, this BBC interview with Baroness Mone. It's definitely touched a nerve today. So the Tory peer has now admitted she could benefit from a contract to provide PPE during the pandemic, but remains unrepentant. Let's have a look.
Michelle, it does feel like the truth has had to be dragged out here.
Not really, Laura, because the only thing I'd say to you is the only error that I have made is say to the press that I wasn't involved. I don't honestly see there's a case to answer. I can't see what we've done wrong.
So she doesn't think lying to the press is wrong or misrepresenting to the press. Is that what she's saying? I would thought that's bad.
It's not illegal. I think she's right. I mean, it's up to the people who hired her to have investigated her beforehand.
Yeah, lying to the press, good or bad?
Bad.
There we go. Right, let's move on to the next one.
Oh, okay.
We don't have much time, I'm afraid. We're going to New York next. Manhattan Bridge was blocked on Monday evening by Queers for Palestine demonstrators, and they marched across it from the Brooklyn side. Let's have a look.
KKK, IVF, you're all the same. NYPD, KKK, IVF, you're all the same. NYPD, KKK, IVF, you're all the same. Free Palestine!
I'm so sick of Queers for Palestine. I mean, for goodness sake. They're so self-satirising, aren't they? Of course. The idea, I mean, what they should do, if they believe in this movement, is go over to Gaza and the West Bank and wear their rainbow lanyards and see how that goes down.
They'll be very well received,
yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Open arms.
It would work brilliantly, wouldn't it? What do you think of this?
I think Manhattan Bridge, that's like a weird choice of a bridge. I mean, it's like...
What's wrong with the bridge?
Well,
I didn't know there's that many of them. There's quite a lot of
them. It's one up from the Brooklyn Bridge. It was the
Right.
second bridge that they built, and they built it. They saved money, and
Yes.
they didn't wrap the metal whatever to make it in protective.
Leaving
things.
aside the history of the bridge, Lewis, which is fascinating. What do you think about this idea when identity politics goes so far and so tribal that these activists feel we have to support absolutely everything that our tribe says we should, even though
the morons.
Homosexuality is, people get killed for it.
Yeah. Well, a friend of our friend is our enemy, and that's what this is all about. An enemy of our friend, an enemy of our enemy is our friend, and that's what this is about.
It's the spirit of Cain embodied in the embittered masses, and I hate them.
That's quite a grandiose way of putting it, Jonathan. Well done. OK, let's have a look at this next video. So this one is, let's have a look now. Christmas. Christmas, it's just over a week away, of course. Festive cheer will be thin on the ground, though, if our old friends at Just Stop Oil have their way. You wouldn't believe what they've been up to now. Let's have a look. Now, look, it's very different than throwing tomato soup at a work of art, which I think is utterly abhorrent. It's just a Christmas tree, but it's still vandalism. What I don't understand about this is, like, I believe in peaceful protest, even if I disagree with the people protesting. But if you're committing crimes, why is no one arresting them? That's insane.
Why is nobody arresting them?
They never do. They just let them throw soup at everything and then rant at everyone in their
Makes you
posh
think
accents.
there's something going on there. Why the two-tier policing?
Two-tier police, and that's the phrase that keeps coming up, isn't it? What do you think about this, Lewis? Shouldn't they just arrest these people?
I think the death penalty.
Lewis, that seems quite extreme to me. I don't think that's the way to go about it.
I think a few
public executions would help. I have to say I don't agree with the death penalty under any circumstances.
All right, so you don't agree with it. Maybe I don't agree with it either, but something needs to be done.
I think arresting people for breaking the law might be a nice start.
They did arrest that one old guy, then one old white guy.
One, but let's arrest a few more. Anyway, look, this is the part of the show where we talk through your unfiltered dilemmas. We don't have much time, but we have got time for one. This one came in from Ian, and Ian says, during Advent, I eat out in restaurants 4 or 5 times, and I love roast turkey. However, I always forget to ask them to serve it without gravy, which means it then comes submerged. I really hate gravy, and the meal is like gravy soup with turkey croutons. So can your panel tell me what to do? You have to be very clear when you order things in restaurants. And send it back if you get it wrong, right?
I think he needs to get help. That was the words of a lunatic.
Really?
Yeah, just look how sometimes he said gravy.
Please don't insult my viewers,
He's
Jonathan.
not well.
No, that's someone who's concerned. I mean, you should send it back, right? If it's an inadequate meal, Lewis?
No, because turkey always has to have gravy because it's so dry. It's one of the least healthy of all the meats.
Okay.
And it shouldn't be eaten.
Okay.
It shouldn't be eaten.
Coming from the carnivore Lewis Schaefer, that is quite an interesting development. Okay, well, look, that's all we got time for. Thank you ever so much for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week when a 17th century painting caused controversy at a French school. British Airways weighed into the Israel-Gaza conflict, and Just Stop Oil started attacking Christmas trees. Thank you so much to my panel, Jonathan Cogan and Lewis Schaefer, and to all of my guests that we've seen this evening. And by the way, if you want to join us live in the studio and be part of our wonderful studio audience, you can easily do that. Just go to www.sroaudiences.com. That website address is on the screen right now. You can apply and come along. And stay tuned, by the way, because the brilliant Mark Dolan tonight is up next. Don't forget, Headliners is on every night at 11 o'clock. That's the late night paper preview show where comedians take you through the next day's news stories. Thanks for watching Free Speech Nation. See you next week.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. There is plenty of weather to keep us occupied over the course of this coming week, and that starts off even on Sunday evening and night. This band of rain spreading its way across parts of Northern Ireland.